Hello, everyone. We are officially at the top of the hour, so I will go ahead and get things started. My name is Cole McFarren. I'm going to be our host slash presenter slash facilitator for this conversation today on Civitas Inspire for faculty. And I'm really excited to be joined by some of my champions from the FSDA team as well, who will be assisting in the chat and throughout our conversation today. So, there's kind of a convoluted title, that I ended up, kind of changing to at the very last minute here, because I don't know that, workshop is necessarily the word I would use to describe what I hope for us to have today. But what I really am hoping for us to have is a conversation. I'm going to share some information with you. A lot of you are already users of IFF and are, champions for it with our other faculty, so I appreciate that. So I'm going to share some information, but I also want to start to have that conversation that's most important and most relevant to where we are in this journey now. Starting to talk about best practices. We've used it for a little bit of time, and I'm really excited to take this opportunity today to really start that deeper dive with some of our IFFs. So yes, please do feel free to post in the chat. As you have questions that arise during this presentation, we'll have a few prompts, to kind of get you thinking about things. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So it seems, gosh, it's almost been 6 months since we implemented Civitas. We did, a pilot before we fully implemented Civitas Inspire for faculty in all courses back on June 5th. So we've had 23 full learning weeks with the product, and we've really, honestly just been so pleased with the results that we've seen so far and with the participation that we've seen from faculty. Because of your, willingness to kind of try this new approach with interacting with your students, we're over 122,000 interventions. That's a mind-blowing, statistic. I mean, that means like every Ashford student has received at least 3 on average. I mean, that's crazy. That's an awesome, benchmark for us to have reached. We're looking at some of those first 5 courses that we're looking at specifically, those entry point courses. We're seeing lots and lots of participation from those faculty and interventions being sent to those students, and largely because the full-time faculty and deans for those colleges have been championing it. So we really appreciate, those classes in particular kind of leading the way for some of the others in a lot of ways. But overall, I mean, you can see obviously down at the bottom, we have this lovely trend line leading up and to the right, seeing more and more participation. Overall, we've seen, over half of faculty in the courses. We're looking at like 63% for all courses simple implementation that have at least logged into the system to take a look at it. And a little closer to about half of those actually ended up sending some type of intervention. So we're very happy, without, frankly, kind of making people sign their lives away, or like putting it in a course requirement, that we've been able to get faculty on board and really being willing to give this a shot. We're just so pleased with what we've seen so far, and we know that we can keep pushing this benchmark more. So thank you to those of you that are using it, to those of you that are championing it with your faculty that you work with. Let's go ahead and keep going here. And then if you want to check and see how your team is doing, we did just kind of a quick breakdown of IFF adoption by college, looking through from the beginning up to the 10/23 start dates. We can see some colleges, like we'd mentioned, with the first 5, we can see that Doge is doing really well. Other colleges a little slower to adopt, but we're still seeing really good progress in all of our divisions. I'm going to go back. So one of the initiatives that we started, we knew that we wanted to start this initiative, and it was also starting right around the very beginning of implementation for Civitas, but we knew that pairing subject matter tutoring with these interventions that we're sending through Civitas was going to be, a real opportunity to have an impact on students. So we went ahead and got faculty, used to the product a little bit before we really started pushing it. But back at the beginning of October, some of you are probably aware, but there are a lot of courses that offer subject tutoring that don't necessarily have links to it in the class. And we knew that IFF would be a great platform to use to get word out about those, specific interventions that we could be sending. So we've been reaching out to faculty. FSDAs have been doing targeted campaigns to those faculty that teach those subject matter tutoring courses, and have been encouraging them to send interventions, to those, number one, to basically all their classes to start with and say, hey, this is a resource, and then doing another targeted intervention later on in the course to students that might need it most specifically. And we've been so pleased, to be able to see almost instantaneous results since we started outreach. The number of minutes per week being accessed for tutoring for these students in these particular courses has gone way up. We're looking at the number of sessions per week has gone way up since we started these types of outreaches. And then the unique users per week also has gone up. And honestly, one of the coolest things in my mind about that project is, number one, we know that students that are sent to tutoring are more successful in class. So we know that coming out of the gate. But not until we got a little bit further into this Civitas IFF journey have we been able to really say, yes, we've known for a long time that it's been making a difference, but now we have some statistics to really back that up. So for those that, are still, waiting to get on board or waiting to see how it goes, that time is over. We're really already seeing, based on some early analysis in Doge courses specifically, there's a higher pass rate in courses of 2.8% where at least one intervention was sent. And I was a little skeptical too at first when I saw that. I said, well, there's a lot of variables that could really go into that. But the way that some of our teams have analyzed that data, they looked at number one, a course that a faculty member taught just before using Civitas IFF, and then also a year in the past looking at, some of those statistics. So we are seeing very positive results. For those of us that, look at these types of numbers consistently or are looking to push the needle as far as retention goes, 2.8 sounds, like small beans, but man, any type of needle where we can see a real clear indicator from using a tool like this is really great. So we're excited to have those initial findings, and we're also looking forward to diving even deeper into that data and really being able to back up why a faculty member should be using it. And here's a couple charts that just kind of outline, basically what I had talked about with some of that proof that we're seeing initially. So I think that we're far enough into the conversation to where we're starting to see, best practices and what they look like, in my mind. So the question, is kind of been, and we've been having these conversations among FSDAs and with the colleges and with the deans and with faculty is what does an ideal IFF user look like? In my mind, it's this guy, because he knows, he's sitting down and he's ready. He knows how much, not easier this is going to make his job, but how much more efficient he can be with some of these outreaches with how he uses Civitas IFF. So please, post in the chat some characteristics that you think, are of faculty that are good with it. Maybe some things, what does their communication look like? We tout the numbers of, like individual outreaches. We keep touting that 120,000 benchmark and things like that. But, we're at the point where we also know that it's not those faculty that are spamming their students or sending, 5-paragraph long messages to their whole class 20 times a class. That's just not really the way that this tool is necessarily meant to be used. 1 or 2 mass emails, or outreaches, I think is fine, but really where, we're going to be able to get the most bang for our buck with this type of tool is really to use it specifically how it is intended for use. And that is to look at the data that it provides and just target very, very specific subgroups of students. So I am going to pop in, and just try to keep the chat open as much as I can. So any other thoughts on, what an IFF super user likes? I mean, how often are they in there? Anything like that. What's the tone of their communication? What in your mind is a super user for IFF? In their weekly, I think that's a great one. And we have made the suggestion right now that faculty get in there about 3 times a week and send interventions twice a week. That's a great goal to set for yourself. If you find yourself at a place in the course where maybe 1 a week makes more sense, or even 3 a week makes more sense, or to just 3 individual students, it's not a one-size-fits-all tool. And I'm really excited that, we're not, mandating faculty to send, you need to send 30 a week, things like that. We're really putting this in your hands to see, how it can be used best. And Lindsay, I mean, right now that is kind of a best practice and what we're suggesting as a starting point. It's not necessarily written in stone at this point, but we have kind of suggested that as the benchmark at this point. Your super user metrics scaled to class size. Well, that's the thing is we're not exactly sure how to measure what a super user is at this point, because it's not that faculty member who sends, if we have a bar graph of like who sends the most interventions, it's probably not that person who sends the absolute most. It's also probably not the person who sends the absolute least. I'm thinking, and I think IFF experts would agree with me on this, is it's those that lie kind of in the middle and use it for very, very targeted outreaches, but do it using Civitas for Kudo type of email. Yes, I think that that's an amazing use of the tool and something that, makes it really, really, it's a great reminder for us. So most of us, and what I've heard from a lot of faculty and what makes a lot of sense to me is if you're a good faculty member, you're already doing a lot of this. And I would agree 110%. You're absolutely right. I do think that IFF does give us a couple of ways that we can be even more efficient in some of those outreaches that we do and make it even easier. Like Stephanie just mentioned about like sending those Kudo emails. You could sort through your grade book and send one to all your A/B students, or you could let IFF do something like that for you. And I've been having, really, really positive results myself, surprisingly so, with some of those positive interventions that I've sent. I'll hear back right away from a student when I send them a Kudo about all the hard work they've put in. I got one back last class. I reached out to like two or three of my top students and just said, hey, you guys are nailing it. Keep it up. You're rock stars. And one replied within 30 seconds and said, you know what? That is what I needed this week. Like that really just means the world to me. Thank you. Have an awesome week. And it meant the world to me too. So, the more and more stories that we can share like that amongst ourselves, I think is great. Now, Lindsay, I'm seeing you posting here, talking about using it during weeks 2 and 4. And I think, we can't paint, our courses with a wide enough brush to say, oh, week 2 is the best one, or week 5, you got to do it. It really depends on the course, and it depends on the faculty member and your style of communication and what you emphasize in your teaching. So whenever, play around with it with your courses, try a different strategy the next time you teach a course. If there's a huge emphasis on the final paper for a course, directing students to a writing tutor the week before that is an amazing way to use this tool. Absolutely. Lisa Johnson, I'm using it in lieu of email and Canvas inbox now. That's a really interesting point too that you bring up, Lisa, is, we've had to kind of migrate, we migrated all the way over to the Canvas inbox, away from email, a year and a half ago when we switched over to Canvas. And now we're going back to, email just a little bit, which was a little bit frustrating at first. And I think that it could be more closely integrated with the inbox in some ways. But now that we're kind of seeing, I don't know, I thought it was kind of cool because in some ways, a student, it's contacting them outside of the classroom. It's almost like you're going out of your way. It's the new text, you know what I mean? They probably see it pop up on their phone, even if they don't receive Canvas notifications, which, or for example, if you're sending an intervention to students that aren't accessing the classroom, well, they're not going to see it if they're not getting into the classroom, but their email is a good way for them to be able to see that, between them checking their Amazon packages and when they're arriving and things like that. So very cool. Thanks for sharing some of these thoughts. I'm going to take a look at a couple more here. Lindsay, seeing incredible response rates. And I've heard from a couple of faculty too that, they say even when we don't see a great response rate, from students or you say, oh, I didn't receive a single response. We can't really tell how many of those students actually saw that email. So there is still definitely a very good chance that your intervention is having an impact of some sort, even if a student isn't replying to say thank you and things like that. So I'm going to keep looking here at the chat just for a moment. Canvas notifications. So there is still, Lindsay, there is still a little bit of a delay, about a 48-hour delay for the IFF information to get updated. So right when you're starting a course, it isn't always right up to date till about that Thursday. And then, you may have a student, they just got in and caught up and they're still showing up as being a little bit lower. So it's something to be aware of, but it is a pretty good indicator of, where students are at that moment in time. So thanks everyone for sharing some of your thoughts. So we had a meeting with Civitas IFF and some of the people that we worked with, on this implementation project. And they had some advice that, we all kind of knew, from the get-go, but I think being able to iterate exactly how that works to faculty. And I'm really, really looking forward to, beyond today, diving deeper, with a lot of you into what an ideal IFF communication even looks like. Some of the feedback they did give us is that some of the stuff we are sending does seem to be a little long. There was one that was nearly 5 pages long, I suppose. It sometimes still feels like we're kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall. Maybe you send an email to your whole class and you say, hey, here's tutoring, here's writing center, here's library, here's honor college, here's everything. That's really, it's great that you're getting word out about it, but I think that with this tool, like the emphasis should really, really be on that specification of the communication, where you're sending it and why. So instead of throwing spaghetti against the wall, we can throw a few noodles at a time and we know they're going to stick a little bit better. And then the other thing that they had mentioned too was, clearly mass form, not mentioning anything really specific about like their performance, just coming across as not really being personal. So here's a good example that they had said, and this is actually about the perfect length they had told us, for what an intervention should look like. It's just long enough to get the point across, but not too long enough to where you lose your reader by the end of it. Here are some other positive examples they shared. And we say this all the time, and sometimes we're still a little bit hesitant to really, really show our personalities in our communication. And, the further and further we get, in time and with technology catching up to higher education, we're going to be looking at more and more, technology like this. This is going to give us data. It's going to help us make informed decisions in the classroom, but it's not going to replace those instructors on the other end. And that is what, I would really hope that people are able to take away from this. It's not a robot taking over your job. It's us letting you steer this awesome new plane, helicopter, boat, whatever you want to do with it. We're giving you the keys. So that personal touch, especially with a technology like this, is just so, so important. A couple less stellar examples that we saw, and they actually brought specifically to our attention. Here's a couple. And I can understand, a faculty member wanting to say, hey, I have this tool. It tells me that you're engaging, not as good as you could be. Please engage more. I can understand, that approach and being as straightforward about it as that. But I think that this type of tool really does offer us the opportunity. And I also don't feel, like we're misleading students by saying something like, hey, I noticed that you're not quite as engaged as you could be in the classroom. Did something come up? Is there anything I can help with? We have tutoring here that you might want to check out before the next couple of weeks of class. Again, let me know what I can do to help. Here's my email. Something like that, as opposed to saying, hello, you're not engaged. This is a mandatory email. Have a day. Not even a good day. We could definitely be more warm and a little bit more personal than, we're seeing in some of the examples. So what are some ways, that we can be personal, in a communication like this? We definitely have, a library of intervention templates that we've started for people, but they're really only meant to be starting points. And we really, really hope that faculty are going in and adding their own touch and really making sure that it speaks to their communication style too. So like, what are some ways that we can use this tool, but make sure that we're really staying personal about it and it doesn't seem like a robot? Felicia, I love that idea about using IFF to communicate with students with overdue assignments or even assignments that are missing still. That's a fantastic way. And looping in the advisor, that's another awesome addition that this tool has really given us to be able to bridge that gap with advisors and loop them in, not on every email, but when it does matter, Felicia, like you mentioned, it really allows us to loop them in super, super easily. So. Lindsay does include some personal notes. Yeah, we have a life and struggles too. Absolutely. I think that example we had, it was talking about like, oh my gosh, the laundry, the dog, the kids. I'm just like you. I mean, the more that we can do things like that, but be, you know, authentic about it and really let our personality shine through, the better. James Roche, I'm reading this here. Here you're saying use only for interventions. I sent an email. So I think, and this is my personal opinion on this, is I would say something that goes to the whole class like that, I would encourage, you know, as more of an announcement type communication. I don't think that we need to use Civitas IFF for just interventions. I do think there are a couple times, you know, maybe beginning and end of the class where maybe a mass email just to say like, hey, now you have my email address in your email. You know, I think that establishing that is good, but I do think that using the classroom and like announcements for more blanketed type statements and then using IFF for more specific, you know, interventions is probably more applicable. And part of the reason, and I'll show this on the next slide too, is you really do reach a point of saturation with interventions of this type. You know, if you're sending 30 a class, you know, after a while, your students are going to stop reading the emails. So there's that happy middle where maybe they just get 2 or 3, but they're way more likely to read them if they know it's, you know, specific to them, especially. And thank you so much for participating in the chat. I really do appreciate this conversation. Otherwise, it would have been a much shorter presentation. So. Exactly, Lisa. We do not want a bot. We do not want students to think that a bot is emailing, and that's I think where you know where this you know conjunction in higher education and technology, where you know we're getting things that are leaning more toward like, oh, a student needs a bot to help them. Well, they still need that personal touch, but we can use data. So like we really have to make sure that you know we're being authentic and being specific in those types of communication as well. Yeah, and Felicia, I don't think that that's a bad tactic at all to use Civitas to reiterate important announcements or like super important things. But I would, you know, just kind of suggest keeping in mind, you know, targeting very low specific levels of engagement. You know, for example, like if you're targeting, you know, the lower quadrant of your class before a final paper, I think that that's a great one. So we're going to go ahead and keep moving along here. And here were some of the, you know, specific best practices that Civitas had mentioned, you know, when we talked to them. They were saying this was one of the big ones that they had kind of drove home for us here at the top, is like when we use those personal messages instead of those blanket ones, their analysis really shows that those are the ones that are, you know, twice as effective as the mass ones. Using SMART, I think that's always good, you know, being very specific with what we want students to do, or, you know, giving them a task like following up at the writing center or a tutor or the library, I think is great. Timing, we've mentioned a little bit about that, you know, right before final papers or at the end of the class, just to tell people they did great and recommend them to apply to honors college. Or even right at the beginning, you know, if they missed their first introduction and you want to make sure that they're getting in there, that's a great time. Like Stephanie, you know, Adams had mentioned earlier, you know, one of the biggest and coolest things in my mind is it's just such a good reminder to give an extra pat on the back to those students that are just being rock stars and may not, you know, get the attention that they might deserve. You know, the old saying goes, the squeaky wheel always gets the grease, but I feel like this tool helps us remind that we do need to grease all the wheels. And then that last one about just enough and really trying to avoid that saturation point as well, you know, I think is really important. So I want to just, if everybody wouldn't mind taking just a little bit of time to share, you know, what was a situation you had where you sent a nudge that was just like really successful or really hit home, or a student, you know, thanked you up and down for it. And then what do you think specifically about it made it awesome? This woman here on the right, I don't know if she's an instructor who just sent an awesome one or a student who just got an awesome one. She could be either or, because I've felt that way on the faculty side too when I get a reply right back from a student. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, Felicia. And I think that kind of goes back to, I think that, you know, in some ways we've had requests in the past too to be able to like email announcements to students. And, you know, I think that we're really still kind of finding exactly what the best way is to communicate what to a student. And as faculty members too, that's one of the things that it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's awesome because there are so many ways that a student can reach out to you and contact you. The other side of that is there are so many places for a faculty member to check, to make sure that they're responding to students, everywhere that they're reaching out. So that's, another one of the nuances that we continue to, kind of perfect as we, continue on this journey for sure. Lindsay Larimore recognizing some of the high performers, yes. Yeah, Bill Davis has gotten some good students reaching back and making connections, absolutely. I find that a lot of students are a little bit more likely to respond right away from an email to their phone. And you can see even set from their iPhone or whatever phone, stuff like that. I think that's great. Oh, Lisa, that's a good idea too, because we know how many students, end up going by another name than what their, given name is in Canvas. So being able to personalize that would be good when we can do, for that automatic fill field for that name. That would be cool. Lindsay, yes, that's exactly it. So a lot of times when we reach out to those students, they reach back out and confirm exactly what we had expected. There was a death, or like they just had a terrible week at work, or maybe they just got deployed. There's so many different things that could happen, but just that little outreach, from their instructor really, really does mean a lot. And being able to make that connection, I think that's awesome. And then some of the recommendations for the Writing Center, awesome. Karen Paramore, oh my gosh, yeah, one of the students that you just wrote to. Yeah, so, we sent out announcements and emails and things to students, that were impacted by hurricanes or the wildfires in California. But, we also see a lot of times, like, it really does take a faculty member to reach out to that person and be like, hey, hope everything's okay. For that student to really open up, and let a faculty member know how they're being impacted. So thank you for sharing that example specifically. We see that all the time. So I will do just, kind of a quick plug for the intervention library. This was a tool that we had set up, at the beginning. It's intended for, beginning users for IFF, but it's also, definitely meant for some of our more experienced users as well. Even if you go in and hand write, every single intervention that you send, the intervention library still has a lot of resources there for you, like links that you can copy and paste in your communication. An example nudge calendar that'll talk about, give you some ideas for when to send what types of communication for your class. We just recently actually added some content in correlation with the Originality Matters group. So we have some cool interventions that we set up on that page and resources in regards to academic integrity. So if you haven't checked that content out, please do go in and have a look at that. So we did some updates to the landing page. We do have some weekly webinars that we've been offering. So, if you're just getting started and or if you're, a pro user and just want to get in and talk with some folks about your experience, we have some weekly webinars that'll be coming up here. And you should be receiving some information when you start your course, or it's sometime earlier in your course from your FSDA about these specific webinars that we're having in real time. And then to just give a little bit of a preview of one of the features that we're going to be coming out with here in 2019 is we're doing a pilot with a cool tool called Annotate Pro, who actually our keynote leader, Andrew McFarren, designed and created. So a little plug for his session. But so we really, looked at this organization of, our interventions in Canvas and then using actually Aquila, our other content management on the side. But it takes a few clicks to get those templates right into your email. So with Annotate Pro, it's actually a browser add-on to where we can actually keep our, comment library and other, types of communication in like a giant clipboard type system that we can also like push out to faculty. So faculty will essentially have a toolbar along the right side of their classroom instead of having to go into that intervention library. We will be piloting it, so it won't be going out to all faculty right away, but we're really, really excited to have that tool work in, hand in hand with IFF. So I'm going to go ahead and open this can of worms here. I know we're just about at time, but I do think that this is important because we know that IFF is not a perfect product. We're still working through kinks. When something's not working quite right, we're escalating to their teams and troubleshooting. We're also figuring out exactly what a super user looks like. So what are some of the things in your mind that are kind of the biggest, detractors or, pain points using IFF right now? Like this woman in the picture, maybe you sometimes want to pull your hair out when using IFF. What are some of those big ticket items that, you think are important to note? Rob, amazing point. I think that's, if you walk away with one thing today, I think that would be it is, just go into this and use common sense. Don't just go in and plug in a template, make it personal. Know that this is going to a real student. They're going to be pulling it up on their real phone and they're going to be looking at it. Rob hasn't been disappointed with it yet. So I think following his advice is very wise. Information delay, Lindsay, that is one of them. Absolutely. And we kind of told them from the beginning, we would love for this to be just a little bit faster. We go on such a, we're in such a fast paced, especially with our courses. We're a little bit of a different ballgame than IFF is usually typically, known to deal with. It. They're used to honestly a little bit more of a traditional campus. So when you have a 5-week course and you don't even get the data in there for a few days, that's a tenth of the course. That's a big chunk of time. Load times, yeah, I could see that being a little better. And part of I will kind of, start to wrap things up because I know I'm right at time here. So I would say go ahead and yes, so the email and inbox with Civitas, we've given that feedback from the beginning and we're really, really hoping to get a closer integration with the Canvas inbox as opposed to using email. I would be really interested in seeing what that would look like. And then, yeah, Ashley, that's a cool one. Labeling the type of intervention. So all these awesome things that you have mentioned, please write them down and take note of them and keep thinking about it while you're using this tool. We're going to be sending out a formal assessment here probably towards the beginning of December, around our 6-month mark into using the tool to get some very specific feedback. We're taking a similar approach that we've taken in the Canvas phase 2 and 3 process to where we can keep taking, informal pieces of feedback and use that as we need to. But when we get 200 faculty that fill out a survey and tell them that inbox needs to be utilized more closely, that speaks a lot more loudly to IFF than just saying, kind of ad hoc, oh, here's some feedback we received. When we can give them numbers behind that, that's really helpful. So we're really, really looking forward to getting some more formal feedback and data on that. And what your opinions are and what that user experience is like to pass on to them to hopefully get some new tools here in the future. So, and this does, don't necessarily, have to type in the chat here for this one, but just try to think about it. And that's what I would encourage everybody to do is just keep trying it. If it's something doesn't work great, one time around in your class, try something different the next time. Move something that you would use the inbox for over to IFF or vice versa, or put it in as an announcement, or, just really keep playing around and see what works best for you, your communication styles, your class, and most importantly, your students. So again, thank you to everybody here for getting in and giving it a shot. If you are here and you haven't given it a shot, you have no excuse anymore to not go in and at least give it a try. But I have a feeling a lot of the people in the room here are our champions who are already doing an amazing job, and B, really talking to our other faculty about it and getting the good word out. So thanks everybody for your time today. I really, really do appreciate your input and conversation. And if you have specific feedback between now and the assessment, I do always appreciate, an email or a phone call, and we'll be happy to do some more chatting about it. So thanks everybody so much for your time today.